When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject: Buckout Road. User: DCK2455. Posted December 20th, 1997.
If you grew up around Westchester County, the stories about Buckout Road are practically part of your DNA. You'll know that the ghost of Mary Buckout, whose family founded the area, is just one of dozens said to roam the woods between West Harrison and White Plains. Another is supposed to be a Revolutionary War general for whom the battle never ended, leaving him to take out his rage on unsuspecting passersby. Even now, with more and more of the land being developed into McMansion-stuffed subdivisions, bored kids from all around the county will drive down to Buckout at night, hoping to see one of those specters or to lure the cannibals said to lurk deep in the forest by honking 3 times. It's all bullshit, of course. There are no cannibals out there, and I'd put good American money down on a similar lack of ghosts, but you'll never catch me discouraging people who tell those stories. Even nonsense stories serve a purpose. In this case, they keep folks from engaging with what's really happening along Buckout Road and in the surrounding woodlands. It's safer for everyone that way. The last time I drove Buckout Road was the night of Friday, May 4th, 1984. Prior to the events of that evening, nothing marked the day as particularly special. My friends and I were seniors at White Plains High, with graduation and all its promise coming up fast on the horizon. I guess if you wanted, you could draw a line between the coming changes in our lives and what happened up on Buckout, though I think it would be more for the sake of the story than anything. No, the things we experienced that night were down, I think, to a combination of bad timing and worse company. Chrissy and I had known each other since we were little and been best friends about as long. Despite our parents' insistence that men and women can't be friends without romance eventually getting in the mix, that couldn't have been further from the truth for us. I never felt a single stirring of lust at the thought of her, and so far as I knew, the same held true in reverse. A big part of that might have been Chrissy having a real thing for bad boys, specifically big, brutish types with heavy brows and knuckles so hairy they wouldn't have looked out of place on the Wolfman. These romances never lasted long before her latest paramour committed some cardinal sin, and he was jettisoned to make way for the next. As we drove around Westchester County on the evening of May 4th, our buddy Rick kept me company in the front seat of my station wagon while Chrissy occupied the back with her latest conquest, Barry. The night had started at the White Plains Galleria, At the time, our brand new shopping mall. Chrissy was hanging off Barry, who was allegedly a high school student from West Harrison, despite being about 6'3" and looking at least 30. As the clock ticked down to closing time, our conversation naturally turned to what we were going to do next. Chrissy immediately volunteered another trip down Buckout Road. She was a sucker for spooky stories and loved being scared. Barry casually dismissed ghosts as bullshit, realizing his mistake only after she started giving him the silent treatment. Rick, for his part, was quite happy going wherever. His athletic career during high school hadn't left him much time to hang out, so just being up past 10 was a novelty, I think. In an attempt to paper over his earlier fuck-up, Barry said he was fine with looking for fucking ghosts, as long as he had some beers to do it with. We all piled into the car and headed for the grocery store at the north end of town. He was in and out in minutes, probably because no one would think to cart a guy who looked like a middle-aged caveman turned construction worker. I heard the first can pop open before I could even turn over the engine, and it hit the floor by the time we had pulled out of the parking lot. To get to Buckout Road, you have to take a lake over the freeway overpass, then turn left onto Kensico, followed shortly by a right on the Hall. I don't know what it's like these days, but back then, Hall wound its way through a quiet, well-maintained neighborhood of working-class houses. That night, everyone seemed to have knocked off early, and most of the homes we passed were dark, save for a handful of flickering television screens. Hall eventually becomes Buckout, going through a kind of physical transformation along the way, with the road itself becoming narrower and the trees crowding in gradually on both sides until we were hemmed in by towering green walls. For all his bravado, Barry didn't say much once we got out there. The noise of the city had dropped away fast, so that minutes after we'd entered the forest, the only sounds were the reluctant puttering of my station wagon's motor and the big man's empties rattling around on the floor. Chrissy, though, she always got nervous on those drives, and when she got nervous, she talked nonstop. It didn't take long for her stream of consciousness ramblings to fill in the gaps. Another sharp popping sound announced Barry's sixth beer. Buckout Road's halfway point is one of the few places along the route that the oppressive canopy gives way to open sky, the crowded trees retreating just far enough to reveal a small plot of land behind a low stone wall. That land is the final resting place of John and Charlotte Buckout, for whom the area is named, and the first spot we usually pulled over on those night tours. Being the only feature in a landscape otherwise blotted out by trees, the waist-high headstone tends to draw your attention, and this was no exception. I eased on the brake, trying, as I always did, to make out the inscription through the gloom. We were almost at a full stop when Rick spoke up. "Since when is there a turn here?" Shaken from my graveyard fixation, I looked toward him, then followed his now pointing finger over to the left side of that road. Sure enough, a wide, glossy stretch of blacktop led away west in what had to be the direction of Old Orchard Road and the White Plains Reservoir. It struck me as strange. I wasn't exactly dialed into the municipality's comings and goings, but Chrissy and I had been this way in the last couple weeks and not seen any sign of construction. In a halting voice, she agreed it was odd to see a new road pop up so quickly. Barry, now fully 6 beers deep, was less impressed, snorting something to the effect of, "It's just a fucking road." The big idiot had a point. It did look like any other road in the area. In fact, it was in better shape than most, hardly the kind of pitted dirt track you'd expect to see in the beginning of a horror story. Still, I felt an internal resistance at the thought of driving down it. Rick shared my trepidation and told me to keep driving. Chrissy had gone uncharacteristically silent. I turned to look at her and saw real fear on her face, not the fun, "oh, how spooky" kind of look she got when we used to tell each other ghost stories. Barry's face, flushed from the alcohol, was full of contempt, and he stomped his foot. "What is this Scooby-Doo shit? Just fucking go. Take the road. Maybe it'll get us home faster." I ignored him and locked in on Chris. "What do you want to do? We can just keep going." To my great annoyance, she looked at him for approval. "Do you really think it's okay?" she asked in a quiet voice. He snorted again, patting her head like she was a dog. "Sure, it's a road, nothing special about it. These guys are just fucking babies. Have your puppy up front, take the shortcut so we can go back to my dad's place and spend some time alone." The hand, not stroking her hair, snaked across her thigh. I gritted my teeth. "Dick?" Chrissy's voice sounded firmer now. "Let's see where it goes, hey?" Even with everything that happened that night, it was this moment where our friendship ended and when we looked at each other in the rear view. I think she knew it because her eyes immediately flicked away. I've never in my life had a problem with any of my friends dating whomever they please, but I will not be disrespected by anyone, and if they let that happen, I'm not sticking around. With that coal of resentment burning away in my guts and every natural instinct I had telling me not to, I shifted the car back into gear and made the turn. It didn't take long for the forest to close back in, clinging tightly to the sides of the road. Above us, the canopy blocked out what little moonlight still filtered through the clouds. I can't tell you how many miles rolled past, except that it was too many. Half an hour of driving west, and we hadn't seen any sign of orchard, let alone the lake. Instead, it was glossy asphalt humming away beneath the tires, leading into what seemed like forever. Rick and Chrissy both jumped at what sounded like tree branches suddenly scraping his door. While Barry stayed put, I took some satisfaction in seeing his head snap in the direction of the noise. It was odd, though. As close as the trees were, the road was wide enough that their branches shouldn't have been within touching distance. There wasn't time for me to think on it anymore, because when I turned my attention back to the road, I had to slam on the brakes. The station wagon shuddered, skidding towards a huge tree which had fallen across our path. We stopped only a few short feet of what would have been a deadly collision, and Barry cursed as he dropped an open can of beer onto my floor mats. After checking to make sure everyone was okay, I took a long look at the obstruction. It was a black oak, at least 6 feet in diameter, completely blocking our way. The sense of wrongness which had gnawed at me upon first seeing the new turnoff was now at a fever pitch, setting my stomach to gurgling. Looks like we're gonna have to head back, I said. Barry, now fully drunk and very pissed off, wasn't having it. Are you fucking kidding me? Let's just move the tree, you pussy. It's a log. They roll. Rick gave me a look that mirrored my own thoughts, which were, I'm not getting out of this car for love or money. When neither of us responded, Barry called us a few more names, better left to time, then practically kicked open the rear driver's side door. Chrissy, her face twisted in fear, begged him not to go, gripping his arm. Disgusted, Barry shook her off and stomped forward until he was backlit by my headlights, and then, in a rush of movement so fast it was barely perceptible, a huge shape leapt from the darkness at the side of the road. For an instant, it was cast in relief by the car's light, revealing the form of a black stag, its muzzle grossly elongated, antlers rising in spiky points toward the sky. Barry barely had time to react before it lowered its freakish head and charged. Blood fountained from the holes in his formerly white shirt and gaping mouth. Whatever violence his life had prepared him for, it wasn't this, and even from the driver's seat, I could plainly see the situation overload his brain. The light went from his eyes, the stag's smooth obsidian skin gleaming in the light. It stepped back, then surged forward again, ramming Barry's body into the tree trunk. The antlers sunk so deep into his chest, they must have punctured his heart. He sagged forward. Chrissy screamed. Her cries drew the animal's attention, turned its head, and Barry's back, his jacket dimpled where the bones had been pushed through, towards us. It let loose a cry of its own, a bleeding bass note which vibrated through the entire car. Then, without any further sound, it leapt across the tree as if the 200 pounds of dead man hanging from it weighed nothing at all, and swiftly vanished into the dim beyond. Barely functional beneath my terror, I shifted the car into reverse and swung us around, gunning it for the safety of Buckout Road. Behind me, Chrissy was still screaming. I don't remember her ever stopping.
Subject: the man in the chair. User: 00F8TH00. Posted September 9th, 1998.
I am not here to proselytize. I do not raise my voice from the pulpit so that I might feel righteous, nor do I issue warnings out of some medieval desire to frighten children into obedience. I am a priest, yes, but more than that, I am a witness, and this is my testimony. The devil is real. I say this not as a metaphor, not as an abstract concept, not as the embodiment of sin, but as an actual human being, sentient, deliberate, patient. I do not know his name, though Scripture offers many. Satan, the accuser, Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies. I don't know, but I have seen his face. It was the summer of 1965, and I was 12 years old. My father lay dying of lung cancer in the rear room of our modest home in the steel town of Homestead, Pennsylvania. He was a hard man, a Union man, not one to speak kindly nor to pray often, though he'd been baptized as a boy and married in the church. I loved him, though I feared him too. And I remember sitting on the floor beside his bed, clutching a Bible I'd taken from school, trying to read aloud the 23rd Psalm through a voice cracked with grief. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Well, I never finished the line because that's when I saw him. There was a man seated in the wooden chair beside my father's bed. I had not heard him enter. The door had not opened. The floor had not creaked. He was simply there. He wore a black suit of a sort I had never seen before. No tie, a collar too high and stiff for comfort. His hands rested calmly on his knees. Pale hands, bloodless, with long fingers that folded in unnatural stillness. But it was his face that struck me dumb. He was not grotesque, not monstrous. He looked, for all the world, like a man. But that was the horror of it. His features were too smooth, too symmetrical. No wrinkles, no pores. A waxen, colorless mask stretched out over something ancient. His eyes were shut, yet I felt watched. His mouth bore a slight curl, a smile with no kindness behind it. It was the smile of inevitability, the smile of someone who waits because they already know the ending. I tried to speak, but my throat closed. I looked at my father, his chest no longer rising, no breath on his lips, and when I turned back, the chair was empty. No man, no sound. Only the sunbeam through the window, illuminating a perfectly round depression in the cushion. I told no one. Who would believe me? For years I tried to reason it away. Hallucination, grief, some unconscious fabrication to help me cope. But I tell you now, I know the difference between dream and truth. That was no dream, and he has not left me. When I entered seminary, I believed I was running towards something. Knowledge, holiness, perhaps absolution for my sins as a young man, but now I know I was running from that smile, that silent man in the chair. And I have seen him many times since. Not directly, not always as clearly, but I have felt him. At deathbeds mostly, in hospital wings and nursing homes with bad linoleum and worse lighting, places where the dying are wheeled into rooms and left alone with their fate. I will be praying with a family, and I will feel it, the chill at my back, the heaviness in the room, and I will look toward the corner or the doorway or the chair by the bed, and something will be there. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. Ephesians 6:12. You see, this world is not simply flesh and physics. The longer I live, the more convinced I became. We are surrounded by the unseen, and not all of it is holy. That is why I warn you, not to shame, not to control, but because I have seen what awaits. You think you have time. We all do. We bargain. I'll quit drinking next year. I'll make things right with my mother after the holidays. I'll stop cheating, lying, stealing. when it's convenient. But sin, like rot, does not wait for permission. The chair is already pulled out. He is already seated. I remember a man named Charles I visited in hospice, a Vietnam vet, a hard life, a believer once, but the war took that from him. We spoke often. He let me pray with him, but he never joined in. Said it was too late. One night, the nurse called me. Said he was fading fast. I arrived just past midnight. His eyes were closed, breathing shallow. And there, in the corner of the room, where the curtain didn't quite reach the floor, a shadow, darker than it should have been. Like it absorbed the light around it, I felt my stomach twist. I leaned over Charles, whispered the Lord's Prayer, held his hand as he took his last breath. The second he passed, I felt the pressure lift, the temperature rise, and when I looked up, the shadow was gone. I don't know what became of Charles's soul. That is God's business, not mine, but I believe with every fiber of my being that something had come to claim him and left disappointed. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. James chapter 4, verse 7. This is not a metaphor. It is a strategy, a warning. There is something that sits at the end of each of our lives, something that waits not with violence, but with certainty. He doesn't need to chase you. You come to him all on your own, one compromise at a time, one rationalization, one betrayal of conscience, and he takes no joy in your fall because joy is a thing of heaven. He simply takes what is his. I know this sounds mad. I know some will dismiss this as fear-mongering, the ravings of a priest too far gone into mysticism, but I offer this as the truth. If you have sinned, repent. If you have lied, confess. If you have hatred in your heart, burn it out with mercy. Not because the church demands it, but because one night, when your body is weak and your breath comes ragged and no one is left in the room but you, there may be a man sitting quietly in the chair beside your bed, and you won't see him until it's too late. I saw him once, and that was enough.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.